Hello and welcome to our Saturdays with Tara Hangout on Air. I'm Mary Beth at the Law of Attraction Club, and we're on the web at theloaclub.com. On these Hangouts, we collaborate with our friends Tara. This Hangout is the summary of our theme for the week and continues on our member conference line with live Q&A. Today's topic, who are you? What are you doing here? The answers are simple. You can get invites to our open calls, which we offer periodically, and our free letting go process by going to the loaclub.com. So now we're going to welcome Robin and Tara.
Welcome. It was suggested this week that the density of the content we've been packing into our discussion summaries has been a lot to get your minds around. And wouldn't it be a good idea if we wrote that book we've been threatening to write for a while now, Life on Earth, a user guide, so that you all have a reference manual. And then you can mark it up and highlight it and so on. So we've decided to slide into this by defining a table of contents. And then each week we'll do a chapter on just one part of the story and handle that in some detail. We're still working on the content list, but here's what will be in one of our very early chapters. Because before we can get into the things about you and your world that you can change, we need to understand the things that you cannot change. Those unchangeable things are what we call the two absolutes. One, who you are and what you're doing here. And two, the law of attraction. You cannot change the inherent fundamental nature of who you are. And you cannot change the organizing principle of everything that exists. But once you understand these two absolutes, you'll know that you can change everything else, and you'll know where to start. So let's begin today with the first absolute. Who are you? There's a logical and simple answer to this question. You're a consciousness. You're an extension of the timeless, spaceless, collective consciousness of all that is. What you think of as you is an individuated entity operating at the fingertips of the arm that is the total you. Your desires and intentions formed you. The next question is, what are you doing here? And the logical and simple answer to that question is, you've been following those desires and intentions down many paths. And now here you are. That fingertip you is here for the fun of engaging in this physical space-time adventure called Life on Earth. Now let's unpack that a little, because we want to be clear that this model of reality we're proposing here is a scientifically plausible theory of everything. In fact, we would further suggest that it's the most plausible. Let's look at three schools of thought. The physical-only model, the physical plus God model, and our model. Let's call it the consciousness model. Firstly, let's consider the materialists who subscribe to the physical-only model of reality. And given the seemingly self-evident nature of your physical world, that's at least a logical place to start. The problem with this is, search as they may, There's just no reasonable explanation for this thing called consciousness. And so you have to leave that in the yet to be explained bucket. Most proponents of this philosophy also make the assumption, and it's a huge assumption, that if anything non-physical existed, you would be able to detect it and verify it within the physical world. And since nobody has yet been able to do that, the existence of anything non-physical remains unlikely. Then there are the theists, represented by the major religions of the world. The problem with this concept is that when you superimpose the concept of a loving, omnipotent God on the reality of a physical world, it's impossible to arrive at logical answers to fundamental questions about life and living. And you end up having to accept one of those highly complex theologies as an act of faith. God, it seems, moves in mysterious ways. But what if these ideas you have about reality are also assumptions? Consider this. Look around you. From a purely physical perspective, what you see, quote unquote, is an interpretation by your brain of impulses received from your eyes. Everything you perceive from all of your senses is an interpretation of electrical impulses. In other words, in the physical model, what you perceive as the nature of reality is a story made up by your brain from the inputs it receives from a physical external world. But what if it's the other way around? What if the idea of physicality starts within you? What if it's all the product of your mind? And what if those intersections you're having with those other conscious beings are not actually in a physical world, but on a non-physical shared thought plane? You're interpreting it all as if it's a physical you operating in an external physical world, which you're sharing with all those other physical beings you're interacting with. But what if it's all a highly complex virtual reality? What if all of it is an inside job? And we say, this is exactly the way it is. And there's no science that can declare otherwise because it's a completely logical explanation. So if this is the way it is, who programs the virtual reality? And what are the rules? And what determines the nature and the outcomes of your interactions? These are all good questions. So let's get into our theory of everything that we're calling the consciousness model. We know you to be as we are. You are a timeless consciousness that's an extension of the collective consciousness of all that is, which you may describe using other words like source or universe or God. You are created from, defined by, your desires and intentions and choices. You are source experiencing itself. What you think of as you is an individuated entity operating at the fingertips of the arm that is the total you. And that fingertip you is engaged in this space-time experiment called life on Earth. You chose to be here, flirting with wild ideas, to experience the idea of sequences through what you call time. You're here to play with the idea of shapes and beginnings and ends and limits. You're here on an adventure, discovering what it's like in this strange focus world, to have experiences and have new preferences and make new choices. The world is virtual. The experiences are real because they exist in the realm of thought. So here's what the consciousness model has going for it. It's simple. Yes, we know that it may seem radical to many of you. As you'll begin to see more clearly as we get into absolute number 2, the law of attraction, it turns upside down the whole idea of cause and effect. So yes, it's radical, but it's not complex. It's simple. And it leads to simple answers to all questions. It doesn't leave as unknowable the concepts of thinking and consciousness and being alive, as the physical model does. And it doesn't leave you with non-answers like only God can know. It's simple and complete. But here's the really good part. It puts you squarely back in charge. If deep down you've had a persistent suspicion that you're an enormously powerful creature, you're right. And there's much more to come on that subject. So the first important thing to recognize in this model is that your essence is consciousness. You're not a physical human being on a physical planet. That's just part of the illusion. You're a thought-based life form. Because of the way you've immersed yourself in this physical adventure of yours, most of your awareness is focused in the physical plane. But that, like almost everything else, is a choice. As a part of understanding what you are, you can begin to be aware of the whole of you. And by the way, there is none of this you need to take on faith. If you come to this with curiosity and an open mind, you can begin the process of verifying this for yourself, as we'll be describing shortly. So who are you? You're a sentient being, a consciousness. In this fingertip version of you you've chosen to step into, you have a low-speed conscious thinking processor, the part that's engaged with us here, and a high-speed subconscious processor that's thousands of times faster. The conscious you makes new decisions. The subconscious you learns how to do everything automatically. At the level of thinking, everything is real. At the physical level, nothing is. You're not a physical human being with limits. Birth and death are not the beginning or end of anything important because you're eternal, which is to say, at your essence, you're timeless. What are you doing here? If you're starting to really understand who you are, you're starting to get that you're in a thought-based game, not an action-based game. What creates it and maintains it as it is are your conscious choices that you convert into subconscious patterns. And we'll be covering this in our law of attraction discussions next week. You're here on the leading edge of creation to experience the fun of making those choices in this highly focused realm. Each choice leads you to new experiences, some wanted, some not wanted, and those awaken new desires, and those in turn lead you to new choices. This is the nature of this adventure called life on Earth. Now look around you again. We know that it's easy to fall back into the idea that there's a world out there. And we know that it seems as if things happen in that world that you have to deal with and struggle through. But just for a while here, let yourself begin to understand that this is just your story. Here's an exercise you can try. Get yourself comfortable and relax. And let's do an about face. Are you ready? There are 5 steps. Let's go. In step 1, look straight ahead and just notice what you see. Now, step 2, close your eyes and keep them closed for a bit here if you can, and see those same things ahead of you in your mind's eye, in your imagination. Now we're going to ask you a really big question. Now that your eyes are closed, is that world still out there? And here's a hint. You're creating your virtual reality second by second. The truth of it is you're not creating it in a visual sense right now. You have an imagined picture of it, and you could describe it if we asked you to, but it's a different version of reality than that visual version, which right at this moment does not exist. Just take a second and acknowledge that. Now, step 3, keeping your eyes closed, do a mental about face and look back at your connection to Source. It extends back from the conscious thinking you, through the subconscious you, back through your higher self, and back through us, right back to all that is. Let yourself feel that connection. Let yourself feel that connectedness. It feels like love. It is love of you by everything, and love of everything by you. Good. Now we have the same question. Is that connection real? And here's a hint. You're an always connected extension of the collective consciousness of all that is. At the end of that connection is your source, and you are integral with it. So, yes, it's absolutely and literally real. Just take another second or two here and acknowledge that. Experience that connection as real. because it's as eternally a part of you as anything can ever be. Without it, you would not exist. Your physical world is a virtual reality and a moment-by-moment creation. But your connection to Source is a timeless, eternal, absolute fact of existence. Now, step 4. Keeping your eyes closed, do another about face back towards that imagined virtual reality you think of as your world. In a minute, you're going to open your eyes. What version of your world are you going to see? What version would you like to see? Does it seem like you have a choice? And if yes, make a choice. And if no, what is it about that old version that seems so persistent and inevitable? And here's a hint of things to come. It's a habit. It's what you've been practicing over and over and over and over ad infinitum. Now, step 5, and this really is a step. We invite you, when you're ready, to step back into that visual version of your virtual reality by opening your eyes. Think about what version it is. As you open your eyes, think about the fact that you're going back into second-by-second creation mode. Each of these moments is like the frames in a movie. Good. Now, are you starting to get more of a feel for the truth about who you are and what's really going on here? So here's where we'll be going. There are 4 steps. 1, knowing who you are. That's what we've been covering today. Know the elegantly simple truth about you, the truth that literally sets you free. Next, we'll be covering 2, how the law of attraction is the basic organizing principle of everything. What you believe becomes. Then 3, developing a set of mind actions and putting together the resources to support those mind actions so that you create a new habit of existence. And having you 4, commit to success. When you truly commit, heaven and earth move into alignment with that commitment. And so do we. And now we'll move to our longer discussion where we'll answer any questions you might have.
This Hangout on Air was the summary of our theme for the week. We do 3 live calls a week with Q&A for our members on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. You can become a member too by going to the loaclub.com/join. Our longer discussion with Q&A continues now on our member conference line.